Welcome to the 99th edition of Make Pro Wrestling Majestic again. I am your Majestic Champion, Tiger Height.
And I am not your Majestic Champion, Peanut Gallery.
So, we were going to cover NWA 312. I set this up a couple of days ahead of time, but because I couldn't find the whole show, we decided against it. Now, what I did see was good. I actually did like the show a lot, but once it got to the Bully Ray and Tom Latimer match, if I can't watch all the matches, I'm not going to watch any of the matches. So, we're only going to be covering Sakura Genesis. But, let's go to your topic. What are we talking about?
Well, we're going to talk about CM Punk.
Okay. So, elaborate further. What are we talking about here? Because there's been a lot of whispers around relating to this guy.
So, Warner Media likes CM Punk.
Well, yeah. He's the draw, and right now they're sucking ass.
And he is being requested by the corporation to have him come back. Now, there are rumors going around right now that there are members of the roster, obviously, don't like working with CM Punk for pretty obvious reasons.
Including three of the big ones.
Right. So, there's this new Saturday show coming out, and it is proposed that CM Punk be the centerpiece of said Saturday show on
How many shows do they
Warner
need?
networks. So there is a thought process going through AEW right now that they are going to do a split of some sort of the roster.
It has to happen.
Yeah, I mean, it does have to happen at some point because the roster is overbloated and there's not a lot of opportunity, I feel, to showcase some of the talent that just kind of get lost in the shuffle.
Right.
There are only 2 shows on television that are in ring, and it's only
one of them is just like a random whatever for an hour. Dynamite is pretty much the focus because you know that Rampage is not there. I wouldn't be surprised if they cut them and said screw Rampage.
Right. So
unless they redesign that.
So there are only 3 hours in the week in which talent can be produced on a national scale.
Right.
You know, Dark and Dark Elevation don't count.
No. Ring of Honor does not count.
They're little teeny tiny internet shows. So with that being said, obviously CM Punk is not very well liked by the majority of the roster because of his past associations with things like Media Scrum. And we all know what happened at that point.
Yes, the brawl and what happened there.
And it's not just the people that participate in the brawl itself, it's also people that...
It literally split the roster on who they supported within that aspect.
Yeah.
There are people who in the roster who did support CM Punk on what he said. I mean, I think that's obvious, but also... I think of how he went about it was also not a good thing. And him sort of perpetuating that sort of negative environment probably would not be the greatest idea in the world, but man, they got to have somebody.
Right.
Because right now, AEW is hurting. They're hurting ratings-wise, they're hurting buildings-wise.
And they know that CM Punk is a draw to the product, to the channel.
He's mainstream draw.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what he is. I mean, he's the only one who, million views. I mean, his return, at least on YouTube, was crazy.
Right.
He was their first ratings big thing for 1 million people.
Right.
There's a reason why he's there.
Right. And Warner Media is a business, and they want what's best for business. And obviously, having someone like CM Punk on your roster is...
I'm sure they're noticing the ratings difference. It's huge.
Yeah, so that's kind of why there is a proposal out there to do a roster split of some sort. We don't know what the roster split really is going to look like, if there is indeed talks of doing it. We don't know if it's a soft roster split where... the roster itself is not actually split up into two separate things.
We are already seeing that, and it's been a colossal failure.
Or if it's going to be a hard.
I think it should be hard.
It should be a hard roster split, like what happened with WWE in 2002 and in 2017. So that's kind of where we're at as far as this whole thing goes. And obviously Triple H announcing the draft, the WWE draft, kind of brings to light some of the problems that the AEW roster has with it being overbloated, with problems in the locker room, and we want to see kind of how that plays out.
Well, my issue is if Tony Khan agrees to the stipulation of bringing back CM Punk, do you believe that there will be a mutiny, especially with the other party involved within that brawl?
No.
Do you think Kenny and the Bucks might be thinking of greener pastures if...
No, they've already signed...
Tony bends the knee to Warner Media.
The Young Bucks and Kenny have already signed extensions.
I'm sure they can. I'm sure there's a clause. I wouldn't be surprised if there was a clause of them getting out or even protesting CM Punk's return by maybe just not even straight up working.
Well, yeah, but
would it be necessarily mature to do it that way? No, but this is kind of a rock in a hard place here with Tony Khan. This is what happens when you bolster this is what happens when the inmates run the asylum, is that anybody can do anything at this point.
Right.
CM Punk made fun of your roster for being a bunch of kids, and every single time we hear something about it, it just perpetuates it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, CM Punk is a draw, and Tony Khan has to show Warner Media that they are making the correct decision on having them on television. Because right now, people, let's just be honest, it's not working. I'm going to tell you the ratings here, and guess what? They're down this week.
Yeah.
Again, this is the third straight week that the ratings were down. And if this continues, this Wembley show ain't going to go over well.
Oh, yeah, and that's the other thing, too, is that I haven't even mentioned the Wembley show. They need someone to sell out that stadium. The only person that could possibly sell out that stadium is CM Punk.
And don't even give me about the 45,000 pre-show. Nobody cares about that's basically saying that you said maybe to a Facebook event invite. It's a no. Unless I see some ticket numbers, it's a no. Now, Forbidden Door, I just saw this. There were a ton of scrappers that almost bought out the entire place. But people are like, oh my God, look at all of these people going. No. The pink on there, what Ticketmaster does is that the pink were bought by third-party scrappers. Almost 3,000 tickets of that entire building were just scrappers. Do you think that resale is going to happen?
Probably not.
Exactly. You know why? Because it's already expensive enough at Ticketmaster prices. What do you think will happen when people have to go to these third parties? They're going to be charging $500 a ticket for nosebleeds.
Right. So, anyways, but going back to the situation at hand, obviously WWE has their system of dividing up their roster, and they've done it successfully for many years.
And this is something that needs to happen again because they're starting to get a little fuzzy here with their roster split previously, but I think the shakeup is necessary.
Right. But, so, I mean, at the end of the day, what would be the best course of action for AEW? Because obviously there is a challenging individual that happens to draw in a lot of numbers. And so you're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place with this situation. And I think that the proposal of a split of sorts within AEW's roster, whether it be a soft split or a hard split, would be necessary. But then that generates a whole host of other questions that would need to be answered as to how that would work logistically.
But also, another thing that just kind of came into my head, how would that split the ratings between the two rosters?
Right.
If somebody wants to see a certain wrestler, they're only going to be watching this new Saturday show. Number one, Saturday show is at fucking death nail. I don't know why they think that's a good idea because it's not. But also, number two, right now, their one show is losing ratings. And as soon as that roster splits, you know that people are going to watch this or that. It might be less.
Right.
I said might because it could be more. You never know. But it would help out if the rosters were split because if CM Punk's contention is going to be predicated on this show, I think people who are willing to work with him would be going to the other show, and people who might not want to work with CM Punk go to the other show. So at least there would be the separation between the two, but also then Tony Khan can bring back Punk and appease Warner Media.
Right. But again, there's a lot of other things that go into that too. Number one, it's expensive to have having two tours instead of one.
Exactly. Unless they book the place for a couple of days,
which usually never works.
No, it doesn't work. I mean, Raw and SmackDown can do it because they make enough money to where it's justified.
Right. They can actually have two different touring schedules going on at the exact same time.
They get high 1 million, 2 million viewers, number one on cable both nights. Obviously, they have the money for it. AEW, I'll even talk about it more, but just this last week, it was ranked 18.
But again, it has nothing to do with that. It's just money. Money is a factor in this, not ratings. They don't. I don't think they care at this point about ratings. If Warner Media wants to give them a Saturday show, that's fine.
But the question is why do they want the Saturday show? Is it because the ratings are so good, or are they trying to figure out how to stop the bleeding?
I don't work for Warner Media. I could not tell you the answer to that question.
Yeah, exactly. We don't know unless we see some sort of press release regarding the decision.
Right. So that's kind of all I had to say about it. I just thought it was interesting.
So wait, now my question to you is the same. What are your thoughts on what would be the best course of action for AEW to do given the current situation?
Well, I think a soft roster split would be probably a little more necessary.
Elaborate.
Well, again, I think that it would then allow for just having one touring company, having one touring schedule. I don't know how that would work out logistically, but we'll figure it out, I guess.
Well, it would almost have to be two, because Wednesday and Saturday would be different because they pre-tape Rampage.
Right. They would probably pre-tape the other show as well.
Depending on what Warner wants to do, that would be a long time between Wednesday and Saturday to do a pre-tape, because then everybody's going to know exactly what happened.
Right, and maybe the pre-tape happens on like a Tuesday or something, or maybe it happens on a Thursday.
Maybe. If they want to do another one, it's almost inevitable that they're going to have to do two if they want to keep it live and current.
Right.
Like, it's just going to happen if Warner is forcing this decision. With Rampage, at the very least, they can do it before or after Dynamite, so they don't have to bring in a whole new set of people for production and getting that new slot. It's just not necessary.
Right, but again, I just think that these developments are interesting, considering
it is.
The WWE is doing their thing with their draft. AEW, is it time for them to split the roster? I mean, the possibilities, of course, are endless, especially for some of the stars that get lost in the shuffle.
Do you think it's a good idea?
I think that given the current state of affairs, it would not be a bad idea to do it, but it's just a very complicated situation, very complicated problem to solve because of the state of the company and where Warner Media is at in its relationship to it.
I would say I know you don't like ratings, but this is television. They're looking to find ratings. If the ratings were more consistent, I can understand your situation, but they're just the ratings are this. For all three shows that they have currently right now. Because remember, they have All Access, Dynamite, and Rampage. Already.
And then they have their YouTube shows as well. It's a lot of wrestling content.
And it might delude their current fan base, which is not the craziest amount.
Right. So, again, I think that a soft split would be better than a hard split, and that's just coming from a cost savings perspective. But logistically, I don't know how that would figure out, and I don't know what that relationship with Warner Media looks like for them to be able to do a show on a Saturday that might be pre-taped.
Right, exactly. So it's just kind of up in the air, but let us know what you think down below in the comments. Do you believe that a new show would be a wise idea, and how would you go about doing this if it's going to be a wrestling show? Because it could be like a reality show or something like they're doing with All Access.
I don't think so. I think it
would be stupid.
Yeah, I think they're looking for a wrestling show, and I think they're looking to get CM Punk to come back in order to bolster the ratings for said show.
Right. Okay. Yeah, no, that makes sense. So when we come back, I'm going to get on my soapbox for the first time in like weeks because there's a lot to talk about here.